Hey guys, today's guest is actually a personal hero of mine. I met him when I was just a little kid, and he came to my school and did the finger trick. And he's been a hero of mine ever since. So I'm looking forward to this interview today with Bob Stromberg.
You're a man. You want to become a better one. You want to level up. That's nobody's task but your own. This is your starting line. This is your boot camp. It starts now. Welcome to the Manlihood ManCast with Josh Hatch.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for being a part of the Manlihood ManCast audience. I just want to encourage you, if you are enjoying what you're getting from us here at Manlihood, please go to Spotify or Apple or YouTube and leave a rating, a review, comment. Let's interact and let's show the algorithms that control the world that the content that we're doing here really matters. That happens when you interact with it, when you share it with your friends, and when you say, hey, this is good and I'm getting something out of it. That helps us to get the word out. So please do that. Our guest today is an award-winning comedian and storyteller, and he's just a phenomenal guy. I've known Bob Stromberg for many years, and I've really appreciated his humor and his storytelling. And yeah, I think we had a really great conversation. So without further ado, here's Bob Stromberg.
This is the Manlihood ManCast.
Hey, Bob, it's great to have you on the show, man. Thank you for coming on with me. I'm excited to have this conversation with you today, man.
Well, thank you, Josh. Yeah, it's a pleasure. I saw you about a month ago at the Sawyer Church and outside Bradford somewhere. I don't know exactly where we were that night, but I think, and you can tell me, is that the first time that we've met face to face?
No. The first time that we met face to face, I was 5 years old, and I was sitting on a gymnatorium floor, and you taught me how to do the finger trick and how to disappear behind a couch with an elevator and an escalator.
This finger trick right there.
I do that for my grandkids, and like it's just great. So that's the first time that we've ever met face to face, and you've kind of been a subtle superhero of mine ever since, because you could get away with misbehaving in public, and that was what I wanted to do. So,
yeah. Well, that's interesting. You know, I remember coming. I think only one time. That was at the elementary school in Port Allegany. Is that right? Port Allegany, Pennsylvania.
That is correct.
Yeah, and you're 5 years old. So, well, that gives me an idea about what our age difference is here. So we're looking at close to 20 years or so. So are you in your 50s now?
46.
46. Yeah. Okay. Well, you're the age of my boys. So yeah, pleasure.
It's fun stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I taught this to many children, by the way, and we would get up and they would put their hands next to mine, and we would go down the line and then do a long finger riffle like that. So
yeah, it was always fun, and I just remember being a kid, and you'd come in and you'd make jokes, and we would all laugh, and it was, and I mean you've got a career doing all kinds of really interesting things, right, and telling all kinds of stories in all kinds of ways, but I just remember that was a lot of fun being a kid and seeing this guy come in, and because we were always told, we'd laugh in class all the time, and we'd get in trouble for laughing,
Sure, yeah, yeah.
And then you come in, and we get to laugh in school, and it was okay. So that was kind of fun.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting that. So you were 5, so that was 40 years ago. That was during a period. I started my career. Well, I really started in 1975. If you look behind me here, I'll move this so you can see this. Do you see that picture right there, right here?
Yeah.
You see that? Do you know what that is?
Is that Cassius Clay?
That's Ali, Muhammad Ali, and George Foreman laying on the carpet right there. And this is a poster. It's not an actual poster of those two guys, but it's an artist's rendering of the poster. Are you still with me, Josh?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I lost you, but I won't worry about that if that happens. I mean, I can't see you, but that's okay. This fits into your Manlihood podcast. I think that here's a picture of this fight in Zaire. That was the rumble in the jungle, if you remember hearing that phrase. It is now considered one of the top 3 athletic contests in the last 100 years. So I mean it was a big. I don't know what the other 2 were, but there were the top 3 in this Ali Foreman fight. The Rumble in the Jungle was one of those top 3, and that's from Sports Illustrated or wherever. I was at that fight.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine that? I had no interest in fighting. I'd never been to a boxing match in my life, or never been in a boxing match in my life, or had any interest in it. But I spent my first year of marriage in Zaire, in what is now the Democratic Republic of Congo. And I was working as a youth director in a church. That was before there even was such a thing as called a youth pastor. If you can imagine that, they didn't even exist then. I was a youth director in the church. I was just out of college, got married. 6 weeks later, my wife Judy and I took off for Africa, and we went to the city of Kinshasa, where I worked in the American School of Kinshasa, which was I did Young Life, if you're familiar with that. I did that kind of work there at that school. That was my job. And Ali and Foreman came to Kinshasa that year, a city of 10 million people. They came to Kinshasa for this Rumble in the Jungle. And at our Tuesday night Bible study with some other young people about my age, most of them a little bit older, somebody said, so we're going to the fight, right? And I said, well, what fight is that? They said, the Ali Foreman fight. I said, well, I guess we could. So we bought tickets for, maybe it cost us $7 or $8 to go to the fight back then, which was, it wasn't a lot of money even then, but it was certainly more than you would think. Now, $7-8 now is so little. But anyway, we bought these tickets and we went to the fight. It was at 4:00 in the morning. We got there to the stadium. 126,000 people at this in a soccer stadium, and we got our seats halfway up there, and we got there about 10 o'clock in the evening. The James Brown was there, the Pointer Sisters were there, a bunch of different acts were there. That we listened to music until about 2 in the morning, where there were a couple of preliminary fights, and then Ali and Foreman went on at 4 in the morning so it could be broadcast back in New York. And we were there for that fight. So
that's
that was
awesome.
Kind of
crazy that they did it there. That was that's an interesting choice of venue.
Well, then
right?
they had the Manila, the Thrilla in Manila, which was George Frazier and Muhammad Ali. After that, and I got kind of interested in boxing after that. But that was a fascinating experience. And many times when I'm driving with people and you get talking about, people start sharing stuff that you go, really, you did this or you did that. That's always I've got one in my back pocket, well, I was at the Rumble in the Jungle. Yeah. You want to hear another one just for fun?
Sure, you can tell me as many as you want, Bob.
Just for fun. 1973. I was going into my senior year of college. I went to North Park College in Chicago, Illinois. And I got a job for that summer of 73. It's the summer I turned 21. I got a job at Mission Springs Conference Center Christian Conference Center outside Santa Cruz, California. And first week, at 21, I was one of the oldest people in the at the whole camp. That seems crazy to me now to think of that, but that's the kind of responsibility that we were given, to think that at 21 I'm one of the oldest guys, except for the camp director. He was an old man. He was probably 50. He could still walk and talk. So, anyway, I got this job and as a chapel speaker. And the first week of camp, the camp director got a call from a youth pastor up in the Bay Area, San Francisco, Oakland Bay Area, saying, I've got a kid in my youth group. He's 16, nice kid, but he's kind of a tough family situation, and he is... I'm afraid he's going to be on the street this summer. He doesn't need to be paid. If he came down there, could you put him to work and kind of take care of him? And so our camp director said, sure, send him down. So this kid, Tommy, comes down there. Tommy and I did not become close friends that summer, believe me. I remember a lot of experiences with him, mostly confrontations, but one in particular. I was speaking to a group of about 100 elementary school students, doing Bible stuff with them now. Tommy is sitting in the back, and I see him slip his hand underneath his T-shirt, and he put it up underneath his armpit like this. I didn't actually see this, but I began to hear kids laughing in the back, and realized that Tommy was punctuating every pause, every comma, semicolon, or period at the end of my sentences during my talk. He would punctuate with his armpit. And of course it was mayhem with these little kids. They were all laughing because of the sound that he was making. Afterwards I called him up and I said, Tommy, that is a remarkable gift that you have. You're so articulate. It's a spiritual gift, really. But you may never use this again during my talks. Do you understand? He rolled his eyes and walked away. This is Tommy, who is now better known to the world as Tom Hanks.
That's amazing. Yeah, you got to tell
story.
Tom Hanks to behave himself.
People say to me, "Oh, so you were not a very good friend of Tom's." No, I was not. Well, I bet you feel badly about that. Now you've been in performance your whole life, Bob. Gee, I bet you wish you'd been a better friend. To which I say, well, yeah, I wish I'd been a better friend to a lot of people. I do. But do I wish that I had been a better friend so that I could advance my personal career? Yeah. I sure do.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I love it when you come across, those little crazy situations where, I have now met somebody who has gone on to become famous, and it's not necessarily I got to go with a friend who was a guest on the Today Show, and this is
on
my
what?
brush with
Say it
him.
again.
He was on the Today Show.
Oh yeah.
And so he was being interviewed, and I got to go up there with him, and got to meet the cast of the Today Show, all the anchors, and Matt Lauer, who kind of refused to shake hands because he had just put on Purell, so he gives me an elbow bump.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I thought, boy, that guy's kind of a creep. And then you find out later on that he ended up being kind of a creep. So
he was indeed. Yeah.
Kind of glad I didn't shake his hand now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I remember hearing about you for the first time. It seems to me it was maybe 20 years ago or so. But you lived in Erie for a while. Is that right? Did you live down? Were you in Erie?
No. I've been I went down to Virginia for college, and then I've been up in this area for quite a while. But so I never really lived. Just Virginia and here. I lived in Roulette and then Bradford. Went to school in Port Allegany. And but I've done a lot of crazy, fun stuff over the years. So
I remember seeing a video or something, or Did you write music as well? Did you do some
Yeah.
music
Yep.
writing? Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe I heard
I do
some of you.
music.
But I remember thinking, oh, there's a kid from Port Allegany he's doing something creative. Not that there haven't been people who do artistic kind of creative things from Port Allegany before, but certainly I didn't have a model to follow for that. Nobody had. I remember watching the Smothers Brothers on the Ed Sullivan Show with my dad when I was a little kid, and thinking, man, that is what I want to do. And but nobody had ever, from our town, nobody had ever done anything like that. As you recall, from our town, a lot of people ended up working at one of the two glass factories, making glass blocks or making bottles. Some of them from my era, from my class, actually ended up running those factories for a while. So they worked their way on up through there. A lot of people did that, or worked for the natural gas company, their North Bend Gas Company. But not very many people were involved in the arts in any way. And so I remember hearing about you and going, oh, well, there's somebody who's actually trying to do something, is concerned about that, and writing poetry and writing books, and good for him. That's fantastic. So so we follow we get these nudges from God about who we should be, or what we should do. And they come from everywhere. I mean, we get our parents, for example, are a great influence on us as to what we might end up doing someday with our life. Quick story about my dad, and this is I'm so impressed with my dad. My dad is still living, by the way. He's in the state of Connecticut. He lives in a lovely retirement center out there near my sisters, which is great for all of them. But I remember coming back from Zaire and having my wife and I were sitting around the table there in Port Allegany with my mom and dad, and my dad said, all right, well, you're back from that. You finished college, you did this year of mission work in Zaire, had a great experience. What are your intentions? What are you thinking that you should be doing now? And I said to him, well, I think I've got this figured out. I'm going to go to this mime school up in the state of Maine, and I'm going to learn how to do that mime stuff and acting stuff and juggling and various types of circus arts performing things. And then I'm going to go around to schools. And I'll say to the principal at the school, I'll ask, can I come and do a performance at your school? And they'll say, well, how much will it cost? And I'll say, or what do you do? And I'll give them a brochure or something. And they'll say, how much does it cost? And I'll say, oh, it costs $100. And they'll say, well, okay. And then I'll do the performance, and they'll give me a check. And if I can get enough schools like that, I could actually do something that I think I would love doing. And my dad, and again, my mom and dad are both educators. My dad looked at me and he said, oh, Bob, that is perfect. And I've reflected upon that many times because my dad's a bright guy. And really, when I think about what I shared with him, I'm going to go to schools and say, can I come and do something for your kids? And they're going to pay me money. And so how could you ever make a living that way? And my dad could have said, don't you understand how expensive life is with insurances and housing and food and clothing and taking care of your wife? And then your kids will come. How are you thinking you could possibly make a living that way? But it's just remarkable. My dad knew me. That always impressed me, that my dad knew me. He understood his boy. which is really quite a remarkable thing. He knew that that's what I was made for. He knew that was my bent, that that's the direction that I should be going, because that's something I was naturally good at. And my first year out of, I went to that mime school up in the state of Maine, Celebration Mime Theater, studied there for 2 full 4-month summers, 7-day-a-week kind of stuff, really intense. But came out of that 2-year experience and started knocking on doors in New England at the time. We moved to New England because we realized there were tens of thousands of schools in a very, very small geographical area, unlike Port Allegany, where you got it this town, but then you got to drive quite a ways to get to places, But out there, everything was within 2 hours. Boston's 2 hours. It was 2 hours away. New York City was 2.5, 2:45. Awful lot of schools in those states. I have 475 school assembly programs that first year, and it stayed right up around 400 for 10 or 12 years that I did that. So I cut my teeth learning how to do what I do. I cut my teeth in that school situation, doing school assembly programs, which is hardly anything to say, boy, aren't I a big shot? I do school assembly programs, but I learned how to do what I do, and I was so proud to go. I'm a working artist. I'm making this happen here, So, and you were in one of those audiences, which was great.
Yes,
so.
for sure.
And then, of course,
like I said, I think it kind of changed the trajectory of my life a little bit.
Amazing.
I've always worked in some way, even if it wasn't intentionally. I've always kind of worked in where I get to use my creativity, whether it's marketing or, try to find a way to make it a marketable skill, But man, that definitely inspired me as a kid.
Yeah, very fun. And then it went from there to a number of different iterations of what I did. But after about 12 years of schools, I realized I don't think I want to do this market for the rest of my life. That might be a bit much. I think I probably could have. I know guys. I worked with a guy for years he's still doing school stuff at 70 years of age, and he's really good at it. So I learned, by the way, that the same techniques that I learned in school, performing in schools, the same techniques that I mastered there in terms of crowd control, in terms of being able to read the audience and know, I've got some concerns back in that area, and learning how to play with them, deal with them without having to deal with them directly, but to get them on my side. Some noise over here. How do I handle this? I learned that those same techniques were techniques that I then used in comedy clubs or business or corporate events or larger things. Promise Keepers, for example. I had the pleasure and the blessing of being a part of emceeing Promise Keepers conferences back in the big stadium days, 70, 75,000 guys. And I realized, oh my goodness, it's the same. It's not different from being in front of a group of 300 elementary school students. It's the same process of reading the audience, communicating with the audience, being able to look at them. And of course, at Promise Keepers, we had the big jumbotrons, so that made it even easier to make sure they saw me. I'd go, okay, which camera am I on? I'm going right at them now. But I discovered the same techniques work beautifully there. So it's fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So when you left the big old town of Port Allegany and discovered the big wide world, did you find that growing up in that small town was very different than the things you'd encounter out in the rest of the world?
I saw growing up in that small town as a real plus for me. I experienced Well, I had a wonderful family, first of all. So that's the greatest blessing. My mom and dad, I never questioned their love for me. I love them dearly, still do. I've lost my mom now, but still love my mom, obviously, and my sisters. I had a small group of friends. I didn't have, people sometimes think they have to have 20 or 30 friends. I don't know where that idea, maybe that comes from social media, I don't know, but you don't need 20 or 30 friends. You need one or two good friends. And, I had a lot of friends that I liked, but I had half a dozen guy friends and a couple girlfriends that were just a blessing. And this is I think, a unique thing. Unlike growing up in the city somewhere, I went to school with the same kids all the way through. These same 30 kids are in my kindergarten pictures, and they're in my senior year in high school pictures. So I also thought it was a real plus because I played football and basketball in Port Allegany and did really well. I succeeded. I played in the varsity football team when I was a sophomore. Not many people did that. We were undefeated, as a football team. We were undefeated 2 years in a row, and that hadn't happened since 1942. And it was, I remember in I don't know, it would have been my sophomore year, whatever it was, 68, I guess. I was a sophomore, and this is another just reflection on my dad. Things jump in my head. I'm sorry if I'm jumping all over the place, but this is the way my mind works. My dad came to see me play, as he always did, on a Saturday afternoon. And as a sophomore, because I played on such a good team and we were beating teams so badly, I got to play quite a bit. And I scored a touchdown that day. And I came home after the game that Saturday afternoon. I remember it vividly. And I was a bit proud of myself, and I said, "Yeah, did you see that, Daddy?" He goes, "Yeah, I saw it. My mom could tell I was being bragging a bit, or wanting to brag a bit, and she kind of started to smile. And I saw her smiling at my dad, and I knew they had something going. And I said, "What?" I said, "That's a pretty big deal. None of the other sophomores scored any. Well, there are only 3 of us on the team, but I'm the only sophomore who scored a touchdown today." And my mom looked at my dad and she said, my dad's name is Bob as well. She said, "So Bob, you want to tell him or shall I?" And Dad goes, "You can tell him." And I said, "Dad, I know you're going to tell me that your team was undefeated in 1945. I know you're going to say that, but we'll probably be undefeated this year too." And my mom goes, "No, what I wanted him to tell you is that when he was a sophomore on his undefeated team, he scored every touchdown that year." And I said, "That's not true." And she goes, "Yes, it is." And I looked at my dad and he went like this. And he did. When I moved him out of the house there to move to Connecticut 20 years ago or so, we found all these yellowed Reporter Argus, Port Allegany newspapers that had been saved, and there was a sports page reporting them on about my dad. He scored every touchdown on that undefeated team. My dad would have never told me that. He would have never told me that. Yeah, pretty cool. So the point about playing athletics in that town is it was really special to be able to do that, because when I got to college, I realized if I had been in a city school, I wouldn't have played football or basketball. I would not have made any city team anywhere in the country. I wouldn't have made the team. Wouldn't have been good enough. But in Port Allegany, there was all those little towns around are small enough that I was able to be an outstanding athlete for that area. So I got to experience that, which was which was, and a lot of other things. If I wanted to be in a play or a musical in school there, I could do it, and I did do it, because there weren't that many kids that I was competing for that role. And so the whole town gave me that opportunity and the freedom that we used to experience in our towns, Josh. I think probably even when you were a kid, but more so when I was. I would leave in the summertime. I'd be out of the house after lunch. I'd take off and go to the swimming pool and go to a friend's house. As long as I was home by 6 o'clock for dinner, my folks didn't have to think about where I was or worry about what I was doing. They knew everything was okay. The whole town was kind of looking after everybody. So, and I assume even you being in the next generation from me, even you must have experienced that. So.
Oh yeah, for sure. When summertime ended, so, I'm thinking like 8th grade, I honestly didn't have a whole lot of friends until 8th grade, and I made a couple really good friends. And so that summer on, from June until August, the end of August, we were barely at home. We were usually up in the woods camping, and then we'd come home long enough to raid the pantry and get back out to the woods again, so,
yep.
And we didn't have to worry about anything because everybody knew who we were and you couldn't get in trouble.
You didn't even have to worry about ticks.
Right. Well,
Isn't
you
that
might get by
crazy?
a tick then, but it wouldn't do that was before the man. Have you ever
Lyme's disease and so on? Yeah.
Have you ever looked into the Lyme's disease conspiracy theory about the Nazi scientists?
I do vaguely recollect them that I don't, but go ahead, please.
Yeah, it was Lyme's disease is named after Lyme, New York, which is where
Connecticut.
there was, or Connecticut, right, Connecticut.
Yeah.
Sorry, and there was a scientist who was brought over as a part of Operation Paperclip, where they brought the Nazi scientists over if they defected, and he worked at this laboratory, and his specialty in Germany was using insects to create, as weapons of war. And so, there's no proof of any of it, because if it was real, you wouldn't know anyway, right? So I just always found that fascinating. Right. Like, what if they just... And I got bit by a tick a few years ago and had Lyme's disease, and I'm like, this is miserable. Stupid Nazis. So
yeah, you doing okay now?
Yeah, they caught it pretty early. The worst part was, I think, the antibiotic that they give you when you first get it. That was the worst part. I was sick for 2 weeks while I was taking that. So.
Yeah, I came back to Port Allegany a couple years ago, and I wanted to take a hike up on top of the hill to the rocks there in Port Allegany.
On Old Baldy?
On Old Baldy, up around the bend from Old Baldy, yeah. And but I was told, first of all, some people from Pittsburgh own the property now. Don't go up there. He's got cameras. It's not worth the hassle you're going to go through because he'll catch you on your camera, and he's a nasty guy. So that was one thing. But then also it was, you can't just walk in the woods like you used to up there anymore. You got to make sure you cover up really good, because the ticks are nasty, and what you get is nasty from them. So, yeah, we live in a fallen world, huh? So.
Yeah, things are broken. They're not fun. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And that's something, if it's not treated properly, that can stick with you for a long time and have flare-ups for the rest of your life.
That's right. So. That's right. Yeah, that's what I've heard.
But, my kids grew up in the woods too. When we bought our house in Bradford, we decided to buy it, along the creek and on the woods. And so, they were homeschooled, so they'd get done with class about noon and take off. And the rest of their education was building forts in the woods, So.
Yeah, it's great. That's great.
Good stuff. So, I think a lot of people out there in the world, whenever I talk to somebody who's from the city, right, they don't understand, don't understand at all the way that small town America works, and the way that people think, and the way that we, look out for each other. And, and to be fair, I don't always understand the way that the big city thinks, right?
That's for sure. Yeah.
What do you think is the difference?
Can you be more specific with that question? What's the difference between the cities and the towns, or?
Yeah. Like why is it that people who live in the city don't understand people who live in the country and vice versa.
I think that we are all to some extent products of the environment that we grew up in, and the difference between growing up, I'm here in St. Paul, Minneapolis. The difference in growing up in downtown Minneapolis compared to growing up in Port Allegany is it may as well be Africa or the United States. I mean, they're that different. It's just a different world there. So the fact that the only thing that makes it similar is that we're all people, so we're all the same in that way, but we're adjusting to our environment all the time when we're growing up, and so I'm not surprised. I went from Port Allegany to Chicago, and that was a huge change for me to go to college in Chicago, right in the city. And of course you have to learn some things about, well, you better really look right and left before you cross this street. You don't have to do that in Port Allegany. That's silly, of course, but we just took off on our bikes and we went. Well, you don't do that in the city. You've got to be careful about lots of things, and if you grew up in a small town, you're not savvy about how to live here. And I kind of can't imagine. So few people ever moved to Port Allegany. I don't know if anybody I don't think I know anybody who moved from a big city to our little town. I mean, not very many people moved to our little town ever. So I can't imagine what that would have been like. I think it might have been kind of nice for them to experience that, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I feel like our town was basically just a Hallmark movie.
It was.
It was so different from the rest of the world, and even the North versus the South. When I went to Virginia, it was a bigger town, but it was still, smaller than most. But in the South, it's just a completely different way of that people kind of interact with you. Down in the South, they're always really sweet and really kind to your face, and yeah. and in Port Allegany, they tell you exactly what they think about you, and it's not that they're unkind; they just tell you exactly what they think.
Sometimes they're unkind.
Sometimes.
Sometimes they are. Yeah. Yeah.
Usually, I think their hearts are good, though. I think they're not trying to be mean most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would say
I think in Roulette, which is even smaller. I mean, that's how many people in Roulette? A couple hundred?
So when I was there, I think it was about 600, and the debate was in whether or not that included a couple of cows. So.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, yeah, definitely small. Yeah. And Port Allegany was, I think, 2,500 then. So. Mm-hmm. But we had to ride the school bus. Like 45 minutes. Well, it wasn't a 45-minute drive, but it was on the school bus to get from
picking everybody up.
Roulette to Port. Lots of crazy experiences riding that school bus. A lot of people that rode my school bus have gone on to do some pretty awesome things too. Isaac Greeley, I don't know if you know him. He was the national. No, I think he was the world no-gi Brazilian jiu-jitsu champion a couple of years ago. Mike Sowers was a Navy SEAL, and he went on he's been in like some movies and started a really popular, t-shirt line. And Josh Kinney went on to be the pitcher for the St. Louis Cardinals on one of the years they won the World Series. And we all used to ride that. There's a whole bunch of other as well. We all used to ride that same school bus together. So that was kind of neat.
How about that? Was Josh Kinney was a Roulette kid?
Yeah. I think later on he lived in Port, when, towards high school, but my mom used to babysit him, and we'd play catch in the backyard. And I mean, really, he threw and I tried to catch because I was not athletic in any sense of the word. So
yeah, that's too bad because you're a big guy. You could have maybe you weren't back then.
Well, no, I was a big guy back then. I was always real tall. They always tried to recruit me to be on the sports teams, but I have coordination with my fingers to be able to play saxophone and guitar, but not to be able to throw or catch. And so I used to get picked on and bullied for a long time by the jocks, and till I realized, I had to fight quite a bit, so I was the Thrilla in Manila. And, I remember one time, the bullying back then was always, you're gay or whatever, that was always what they wanted to put on you. And I remember a football player was picking on me one time and said that. And the funny thing is I had kissed his girlfriend the night before on the band bus, so I really wasn't that worried about it.
That's why he said that. That's why he said that.
You didn't know yet, but we worked that out.
Hey, you're supposed to be interviewing me, but I'd be interested to know, how did you come up with this podcast? Because you've been at this for, maybe even some people listening to this for the first time don't know this story, and you've been doing this for like 10 years, right?
Yeah. The podcast itself was a little less than that. We started as a blog, and so when I came back from college, I also worked in youth ministry for a while and led a group of teens in town, and then once I moved to Bradford, I kind of kept in touch with a lot of those kids, and then a lot of those kids started getting in trouble. They're now young men, and they're getting in trouble for drugs or all kinds of horrible things kind of creeping into their lives. A few of them died from overdoses and suicides, and I'm like, I kind of felt like I failed them, and so that was kind of one of the things that motivated me to start doing Manlihood, is I wanted to, I'm like, I need to be able to invest in these. And it wasn't just those young men, because there's young men suffering with that all over. And I recognized I had the awesome privilege of having an amazing dad who took the time to teach me how to be a man. And a lot of these kids didn't. And so I wanted to try to take the things my dad taught me and pass that along. And, that's what started Manlihood. That's where it kind of came from, was that desire to help young men learn how to become men. And now we mostly just have fun conversations on the internet. So,
yeah, I listened to one part of your podcast where you're talking about, I think recently, about the two most important things your dad said to you, which were, "I'm proud of you and I love you." Yeah. Right. I think it was in the other order, but nevertheless, those are powerful words for a kid to hear from his dad. And I've shared them in my comedy routine, as you've heard me do something recently that about how my dad and I didn't say those three words, "I love you," and yet I never, and I'm still, I think it must be as I share that story around the country, I'll see men my age just shaking their head. So I know a lot of this it's generational. It's also ethnic, I think, to some extent. That Swedish stoicism that exists. There's no question about that. That's part of it. You share in the kinds of ways that your father did. So I am sure that you many times said to your children, I love you and I'm proud of you, over and over, as I did too. But I kind of broke a cycle there. Mm-hmm. But I never ever questioned about my dad's love. I always knew, as I just shared, I knew that he knew me, he knew my heart, he knew who I was and he knew my strengths and my weaknesses. His love for me was unconditional, and I knew that. We just didn't say those words very much. But I'm ever grateful for my dad. My mom died in 2020 during COVID, not from COVID, but she died during that time. She and my dad at that time were both in nursing care, both really sick. I lost my mom. So I started FaceTiming my dad just because I felt I characteristically would have spoken to my dad maybe once every week at the most, usually 2 weeks, sometimes a little bit more. For my whole adult life, we would just have a quick talk on the phone, chat on the phone. Neither one of us liked talking on the phone all that much. But when my mom died, I realized, gee, the guy's alone, and so I'm gonna start FaceTiming him, which I did, and it really became a very special thing for us. It still is. We FaceTime pretty much every night. We chat, and we never end a conversation without saying, "I love you, Dad." He'll say, "I love you, son," or vice versa, and it's a wonderful thing. I'm so thankful for him, and I as again I say, I broke that cycle with my own sons. My wife and I always made sure they understood how much they were loved, and with our grandkids to help them understand how much they are loved. It's unconditional. There's nothing they can do. There's nothing they can do to cause us to love them less than we do. So
that's awesome. I think it's important because, well, I do think it's important that we say it. Those words matter. Mm-hmm. However, at the same time, it must have taken a special set of skills for your dad to be able to prove it without saying it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because you said you never even questioned it because you knew it.
Never. No. Well, he was always there for me. No, I say he was always there for me, but athletics was so very important to me during those years. Basketball probably more than football, and my dad wasn't able to get to some games because he was an educator and he had other meetings and he couldn't get out of sometimes, and he would have to miss them. And he would always tell me how badly he felt. Tell me about the game. Let's talk about the game. But he was usually there for that. And it was. My dad is probably, I think, maybe the best man I've ever known. I mean, that's the esteem that I hold him in. He's just a wonderful guy, and not only the way he treated me, but I've looked at the way that he's treated others in the family as well as everybody that he knows. And most people would say that about my dad. I've heard them say that about my dad. Your dad's the best person I've ever met. I think he is. So I don't know if I've ever heard him say a bad word about anybody. Now, we'd have conversations where we'd be talking about someone, for example, that we needed to talk about for any given reason, and he might say, "Yeah, I agree. I think that's." I think maybe that person's made some really bad decisions. That way of, rather than saying I've never heard him call anybody a jerk. I've never heard or any expression like that. He would, you would know how he felt about somebody, but he wouldn't use any kind of degrading, condescending words about anyone. Just great guy. That's loves awesome. The Lord, and that has. By the way, that's another thing that we could have talked about today. My whole career, I have seen myself. There are Christian performers, and there are performers who are Christian, and a Christian performer being a performer who primarily performs for Christian people, and primarily as whatever their performance is, whether it's music or comedy or theater, they're doing Christian material, meaning they're telling a story about Christ, or they're teaching, or they're whatever. But it's Christian material. I never saw myself that way. I always saw myself as a performer who is a Christian, which means I can perform anywhere. Not that I would, but I could perform anywhere for anyone, because when I walked into every school I ever walked into back then, I would pray, and the same is true with every corporate thing that I would do. I did I took, for about 20 years of my life, I did pretty much just did one show, a theater show. When I would walk in that building or that conference center or that theater or that church or that school, my attitude would be, Christ, I pray that your light would shine through my eyes to everybody that I speak to, everybody that I talk to, that I run into there today, the teachers, the children, the theater audience, whoever it is, that your light would shine through my eyes in some way. And that, I feel that God has just blessed that beyond my imaginings through all of these years. I'm so thankful that that He's allowed me to do what I love and what I feel I was made to do. What a great thing! I hope you feel that in your own life, Josh. I hope you're experiencing that to some extent. That feeling of it. And that doesn't mean it's easy. It's not easy. I mean, work is work, but but to feel blessed in it, and to feel like I'm doing what I should be doing, and to know that God is providing. People think they have security because they have a particular type of job, or they get hired by a company or whatever. You don't have any security. I mean, it can all be gone. Whatever you're experiencing right now, it can be gone like that. Or worse yet, you can have all the financial stuff that you can imagine, and yet you get that one phone call about your wife or about your child, and none of it even matters. That's when you realize this doesn't mean a thing to me. What was I doing? Thinking that this was so important, when what's really important are these people that God has given me and my family to love. And so, yeah, just some random thoughts shooting through my head.
Those are some very good thoughts, man. I think about them a lot. Yeah, I can relate to and understand that idea too of, I'm a Christian and my job is to represent Christ. But that doesn't mean that everything I do has to be for Christians, So, I tell people all the time, people say, well, is Manlihood a Christian podcast? Because they look at me and they see, oh, he's involved in ministry and he's a worship leader and he's really heavily involved with his church. And I'm like, Manlihood is not a Christian podcast. I might have guests get on here who believe something completely different or cuss. I don't censor them, I let them be who they are, but my heart is to, everything I do, I want God to be glorified in it. So I can completely relate to what you're talking about. That's definitely a motivator in my life, because, you don't have Christian car washes, right? You don't have Christian janitors. You have janitors who are Christians, and when you're in there and you're mopping the floor, you're hoping that prayer that you prayed before you go and perform, that's your prayer there too,
That's right. I feel the same way when it comes to politicians, when it comes to doctors. I think it's wonderful when some of the doctors I've had to deal with in the last, I've had a couple of years of a lot of difficulty medically, and the faith of my doctor, if they happen to be a Christian, I'm just thrilled, because we have something in common. I have something special. I have a bond with my doctor or my nurse when I realize that she's a follower of Christ. She's a sister. But I don't want a doctor who is that's not my primary thing, to have a surgeon who's a Christian. I want a surgeon who has done this surgery many times and done it well. That's the most important thing to me. So,
Exactly. So, it's funny because we scheduled our podcast for yesterday when we first scheduled this conversation. Yeah. And you had booked it. We've been talking about this forever. And, I had just saw you a month ago performing, and, probably the biggest gag of the night when you were performing was talking about colonoscopies. And my I'm going to call him my business partner, but he's technically my boss because I'm not a partner in our business, but I work for him. And he says, "Hey man, I got to go get a colonoscopy on this date. Do you think you could take me up?" And I'm looking at my calendar and I'm like, I have to cancel with Bob Stromberg to take my friend to get his colonoscopy.
Good for you. That's great.
So I just thought you'd appreciate that story.
Yeah, no, I do. And I don't say this. Yeah, the reason Josh brought this up, I'll say to all of your viewers or listeners here today, is because one of my comedic pieces that I've kind of become known for in the comic world is my colonoscopy piece. It's quite a funny 10 minutes. So I'm real thankful to have come. It almost makes it worth going through everything that I went through. Anyway, but what I don't mention, I don't think I mentioned anyway, is that that colonoscopy that I talked about actually saved my life, or the colonoscopy itself did, because I ended up discovering a tumor and then having to have multiple surgeries and life-altering things, but saved my life. So I'm really grateful for that. And boy, did I come to be thankful for the men and women who cared for me during my long time of convalescing in the hospital. I had never been what I recognized as helpless before. Never. I had always felt like I'd been healthy most of my life, but the feeling of being helpless, realizing I can't do anything here. I can't stand up. I can't sit down. I can't move. I'm helpless. That's quite a feeling. And I think a good one for all of us to know that we can be like that. A lot of our listeners and viewers know that feeling well, and know that we don't have. We sometimes get to think that we have a lot of control over what's going on in our lives, and we don't even have control over what's going on in our bodies, let alone handling everything else. So to be helpless it's quite a feeling, and it was instructive, and it caused me to appreciate and to love those who are caring for me in powerful ways. I mean, when I said, and I was only in the hospital, well, I was in there several times, but no more than 5 or 6 days. But when I left there, it was just I was emotionally overcome to say goodbye to nurses who had cared for me during this time, because I realized you don't know what you did for me. You don't know what this means to me, that you took care of me like you did. So, yeah.
It's powerful stuff, man.
Yeah.
Hey, I know that we're getting close to the end of our time, Bob. So let's transition to my questions that I like to ask all of my guests. I'm really interested to hear your perspective on these. So the first one is, what does it take to be a man? Well,
and as you know, because you've asked many men this question, it's a loaded question, because that's what I assume this entire Manlihood ManCast is about, to help people understand more and more what it means to be a man. I think one of the things that comes to mind for me is, it seems to fly in the face of manhood, but it's a sense of surrender. And by that I mean, I'm thinking about my relationship with my wife, with my kids. I think to be a man to them means to surrender my life to them. Speaking about my wife, Judy, for example, it's been 50 years now of learning what it means to surrender my life to her. Not to that doesn't mean that every idea that, when we have a conflict that I have to give in, that's not what it means. But it means that I have to be wide open to to ignoring my own ego in some things, or my own sense of pride, or my own sense of that, certainly that sense of I have to be right. I have to surrender that. I also have to surrender that to my children often. Sometimes, I've grown children, and sometimes we have very different views on things, but I have to recognize that I have to allow them to be themselves here. I don't have to make sure they understand that I'm right about this. If I am, they'll find out about it at some point. I just have to surrender and love them. And certainly to be a man in relationship to my Creator, I have to surrender. I have to surrender my life to His will. When I thought I was going to die, I remember saying to my wife, I thought we got the call from the surgeons with the diagnosis, which was really bad. And I said, I thought that when you see people's knees shaking, I thought that in collapsing, I thought that was something in cartoons. I didn't know that was a real thing. And so I'm talking to him, and I get the diagnosis, and I almost went down. And that's when I realized, but within a minute, I was rallying and going, this isn't my life. I'm not in control of, I may have thought I was in control an hour ago before I got this call, but I wasn't. Or a year ago, I wasn't in control of my own life. None of it's in my control. I mean, little things are, decisions I can make, but I don't know, I've said to my dad many times, he's 95 now, I've said to him, Dad, we shouldn't think for a minute that you're going, that I'm going to outlive you. We're not in control of those things. I said, I may very well go to be with the Lord before you do. And he said, yeah, that's true. So we need to surrender our will to God. I think that's, and to our wives and to our children. And we need to surrender. We probably, as Jesus said, we need to be the servant of all, which is another way of surrendering to people. Yeah. I think that's one of the things it takes to be a man.
I like the idea that to serve and to surrender that's probably a really good way to explain it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, mm-hmm. I can see that. That's a really good answer, Bob. By the way, I'm glad that you're still here.
Yeah, thank you. Me too.
So that's a good thing. So let's say that you're able to hop into a time machine and set the date back to when little Bob was 10 years old, and you can go have a conversation with him. What do you want to tell 10-year-old Bob?
I would, again, it's a loaded question. There are lots of things and lots of different things I probably should tell 10-year-old Bob. But when you asked that question to me, one of the things that comes to mind was a interview I saw between Charlie Rose. I don't know if you remember him or not. He was another guy who got in trouble for sexual stuff, and I think his show got canceled along with his show. But Charlie Rose was interviewing James Taylor, and he was asked that question. And he answered in a way that I just thought was great. He said, I think I would tell my younger self, if I had known that things were going to turn out as they did, I would have enjoyed life a whole lot more. And that's true. I know I would say to my 10-year-old self, you do have a tendency to worry a bit and to project into the future a bit more than you should, instead of being thankful and enjoying the day you're in right now. And I know that that's true for me. And so I would tell my 10-year-old self that. I know if I had, excuse me, I get rid of this. if I had known that my life was going to turn out the way it did, I know I would have enjoyed it more. And I've enjoyed it a lot, but I would have enjoyed it more.
Great answer. Great answer. And good, a good reference there as well. James Taylor's good stuff. So my last question is for the men that are listening today. What is your best advice for them?
I think I would, you know what? I don't think I would probably tell them more than what we just said. I would tell them, learn to be what it means to be a man. Learn what it means to surrender and serve others. Understand that you're not in control of your life. Understand that every single day in your life, this day is a gift. It's a gift. There was no guarantee when you woke up this morning that you would. There's no guarantee when you woke up this morning that you would be listening to this podcast right now this afternoon. You're not in control of that. It's a gift from God. He's given you this day. So be grateful, be thankful for it. Rejoice in it.
Awesome. I think that's excellent advice, and I would agree with it 100%, man. So, Bob, if our listeners want to connect with the work that you're doing, they want to find out more about you, get to know you and some of the comedy, because you've got some amazing comedy, what's the best way for them to make that happen?
BobStromberg.com. It's that's it. BobStromberg.com. There's all the information they would want to have me about there. I used to have up dozens and dozens of videos, and I narrowed it down to 3 or 4 that are there. I just put a few, realizing people that they can go to YouTube. There's so much bad stuff on YouTube. People standing with their phones videotaping, but I put some good stuff there for people to watch at BobStromberg.com.
Awesome. Well, we will include that in the show notes so people can check you out. I really appreciate this conversation, man. Thank you for inspiring me to misbehave in the right ways when I was a kid, and and I really appreciate it, man.
That tickles me. It tickles me to think about that. Now that's rewarding to know that I was an encouragement to you, Josh, way back then. So
yeah, I remember going home and showing my parents the finger trick and pulling the couch out and showing them how to use the escalator. And I was barely taller than the couch, so it only took like 2 steps, but
yeah. Funny.
So, anyway, I really appreciate you, man. Thank you very much.
Bless you, brother.
This is the Manlihood ManCast.
Bob, thank you again for being on the show with us. I really appreciate you. Guys, make sure you go to bobstromberg.com. Let's support the work he's doing there. Check out some of the fun videos he's putting together. And, I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today, man. Those of you that are listening, I appreciate you very much. I hope that the content that we're putting out here at Manlihood is helping you to become an even better man. That's my vision. That's my heart. That's the core of this movement. And it's not just me. It's you. When you are sharing our content, when you're interacting with us, when you are leaving ratings and reviews on Spotify and Apple, and when you're doing the work to help us get the word out, you're a part of this movement. But even more than that, when you're becoming a better husband and a better father and a better leader in your community, you are helping this movement. And I'm really grateful and I'm really thankful that you're doing that. Anyway, guys, just wanted you to know I love you. I'm proud of you. And I'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Manlihood ManCast. If you want to be a better husband, father, leader, a better man, you need to join our private Facebook group, the Manlihood ManCast. Join today. Please help us out with a like, comment, share, and subscribe. And check us out at manlihood.com.